Hello and welcome to a brief history of Geordie folk rockers Lindisfarne with me, John Hebden, and founder member of the band, Rod Clements, who I talked to earlier this autumn. Here's how BBC music reviewer Sid Smith began his review of the Lindisfarne album The Charisma Years back in 2011. In their early 70s heyday, Lindisfarne packed the punters into ballrooms and halls from Wallsend down to Watford. A ticket to see Newcastle's biggest musical export since the Animals was a guaranteed knees up with a complimentary sore throat after singing along to terrace anthems such as Clear White Light, We Can Swing Together, Meet Me on the Corner and inevitably Fog on the Tyne. If, however, you get past the Jolly Japes and revisit the 5 albums they recorded for the Charisma label, one is reminded that there were also some serious and seriously good songwriting to be found. When I met up with Rod Clements, I asked him about how Lindisfarne first came together.
Well, I was in a band with a few mates originally at school when I was at boarding school, and then when I left school, I took the band name with me, which was the Downtown Faction.
Yeah.
And started the band. It was a blues band really, with some mates around North Shields, sort of near neighbours, really, including Ray Laidlaw and Simon Cowell.
Yeah.
And then we hooked up with Ray Jackson. He became a member of the band, and we did quite well on the local circuit, playing clubs and dances and things like that. And actually started making an album in London. Around the same time, we met up with a guy called Alan Hull, who was doing the Northeast Folk Clubs, and he invited us along to a club that he was running, and we did a kind of acoustic blues set.
Mm-hmm.
Woody Guthrie, Lead Belly, that kind of thing. A few things of our own. We'd started writing our own stuff, and eventually we and Alan joined forces, and for a while we had 2 names. The band was called Brethren by then, so we were Alan Hull and Brethren.
Mm-hmm.
If he'd got the gig, or if we'd got the gig, it was Brethren with Alan Hull.
Right. And you then got quite a significant recording contract, didn't you, with Charisma Records?
We did, yes. That's how the name change came about, because we signed with Charisma in, I think it was early 1970, and they told us there's an American band called Brethren, and they're going to be huge, so you're going to have to change the name.
Right.
Of course, nobody ever heard of the American Brethren anymore after that, but it did provoke us into a name change, and we spent ages trying to think of something, and John Anthony, who was the producer of our first album, was up here in North with us, going through songs and rehearsing tracks and things like that. And somebody mentioned that they'd just been up to Lindisfarne that weekend, and he said, "Oh, what's that? What does that mean?" So we explained it's the name of an island, etc. And he said, "That's perfect. That's a great name for the band." And we were a bit flummoxed by that, because we thought it was like calling the band North Shields or something like that. But we went with it, and it worked well for us. And I have to say, it as a name, it's served us very well and provides some of the band's character, I think.
It wasn't until the band's second album, The Fog on the Tyne, that the band really hit the big time. Here's Rod Clements.
The first album, Nicely Out of Tune, got good reviews, but didn't sell spectacularly well, and neither did the first 2 singles of it. But for the second album, Charisma got us Bob Johnston as a producer. As you probably know, he's an eminent American producer who's done Johnny Cash and Dylan and Leonard Cohen and loads of people. It was a great experience working with him, and he was very good at picking songs and helping us to arrange them. And one of them was "Meet Me on the Corner," which was my song. It had been kicking around for a couple of years, and that became the first hit, which was the key to Fog on the Time, the album, becoming the biggest selling album of 1972, I think it was.
Yes.
71, not sure. Anyway, it was the biggest selling album in the UK that year.
So it's a bit of an irony, wasn't it, that Alan Hall, the great songwriter, that it wasn't actually his song, but it was your song that sparked off your success.
Yes, it was an irony that wasn't lost on him, and he never really forgave me for it.
Oh dear, sorry about that. After the band's early success, the band split in two in 1973. I asked Rod how this came about.
Several things then happened. We were very successful. We toured the UK, dipped our toe into Europe, went to the States a couple of times, did a tour with Status Quo and Slade around Australia and New Zealand. But the workload was actually very heavy, and it was affecting Alan's writing. And the third album, Dingley Dell, which I still think it was really good. It was there were some good songs on it. There were some maybe not so great songs on it as well.
Yeah.
But I think the media and the press were kind of, we'd had our hour in the sun, and they were out to see us get our comeuppance, if you like.
Yeah.
And we were disappointed with the reaction to it. Alan had had enough of being on the road. He was just fed up with the whole circus. We had disagreements about musical directions, and eventually Alan announced that the band had split up. Ray Laidlaw, Simon Cowell, and I spun off to form a band called Jack the Lad, which did pretty well actually for a couple of years. I only hung about for the first year, and then I went freelance for a bit.
So what happened to your songwriting, Rod? Were you the main writer with Jack the Lad?
I was one of them. Simon Cowell's writing was coming up as well, and we got Billy Mitchell in, and he wrote as well. So it's a three-way thing.
Okay.
Really, I think I had 4 or 5 songs on the first album, but that's the only album I did with Jack the Lad.
Ray Clements left Jack the Lad after one album, and I asked him what he did next. Okay.
I went off after that to play with various people like Ralph McTell. I played on the streets of London.
Yes.
And Michael Chapman, Bert Jansch, who I worked closely with for a couple of years.
So this was mainly playing the bass, was it?
It was mainly playing the bass and a bit of slide guitar and a bit of mandolin.
After their split in 1973, the original Lindisfarne lineup reformed in 1976. Rod Clements explained to me how this came about.
Well, basically we had an offer we couldn't refuse. A promoter in Newcastle suggested to us that we got together to reform the band at Christmas in Newcastle City Hall.
Yeah.
Which we thought it was just going to be a short-term thing, but in fact it was so successful that we were persuaded to keep it going. Well, initially we did one pair of Christmas shows in 76, but it went so well we were asked to do it again in 77, which we did, and again it was extremely successful, more than anybody expected.
Yeah.
So we threw our lot in together full time again.
And how did it feel coming back together again after you had the big split in 73? Was it easy to work together again?
Yes, it all fell into place very easily indeed, and the response was just tremendous. I mean, the first night back together in Newcastle City Hall in 76 was just a huge uplift to everybody, to the band, the people around us, the audience, and everybody. And we thought, this is something really special. Would be daft not to keep this going.
Carry on. So that was really good. So you got back together properly in I think 78, and then had success again with an album and a couple of singles.
Yeah, we did. Back and Forth was the the first album we did, and of course, "Run for Home"
Yeah.
was the big song off that one.
I asked Rod how long he had stayed with the band following this late 1970s reunion.
I was present from the 76-77 reunion right through until 2003, when we finally called it a day, as we thought.
So how were those years?
The initial success obviously tailed off. The scene changed a lot. You had punk coming up and a lot of new music, and we were somewhat unfairly, I thought, considered old hat, because we, I think punk was largely seen as a reaction against the pretentiousness and overblownness of prog rock and ostentatious superstardom, and we were never into that anyway.
No.
We were very much a people's band. We did songs that people could easily relate to. We didn't have pretentious lifestyles or anything like that. But we got considered old hat for a while.
Yeah.
But we were very lucky because we always had a good live following. We had the Newcastle City Hall Christmas shows, which became something of an institution, really.
Yeah.
And it was worth keeping going. And we did continue making albums because we were writing. Still, we had new songs that we wanted to do, and the album sold okay to the devoted following, but didn't do much in the wider scheme of things, really.
As the band headed for another hiatus in 2003, Rod Clements got stuck into some solo work. Rod explains.
Before the band split, I was writing stuff that wouldn't really have fitted with the band, and I did a couple of solo albums. Stamping Ground is probably the best one, and wanted to do some gigs. So around about 2003, 2004, I joined forces, or rather continued really, with Dave Hull Denham, who had been in the last lineup of Lindisfarne, and Ian Thompson, the bass player.
Right.
We went out as a trio, as the Ghosts of Electricity. Listeners might like to speculate on where that name came from. The Ghosts of Electricity were really put together to play my solo stuff.
Right.
And we joined up with a drummer as well, Paul Burgess, and did a few sort of full band electric gigs and had a lot of fun.
And you recorded albums, I guess?
We did one live album
Right.
as the Ghosts of Electricity. I did 3 solo albums, One Track Mind, Stamping Ground, and Odd Man Out.
Right. And can we get these on streaming sites?
You can certainly get Stamping Ground on Spotify.
Yeah. After further solo years, Rod Clements rejoined Lindisfarne in 2015. He explained to me how that came about.
In 2013, Ray Jackson decided to reform a version of the band, which he called Ray Jackson's Lindisfarne. And he assembled a band of people who'd all had associations with Lindisfarne in the past, including Dave Hull Denham, who I mentioned,
Yes.
Ian Thompson, the bass player, Charlie Harcourt, who'd been in Lindisfarne Mark II, and Steve Daggett, who'd produced a couple of albums for the band and for Alan in the 80s. And they played at Newcastle City Hall for Christmas 2013 and 2014.
Okay.
And after that, Jacker decided to retire.
Okay.
The others decided they wanted to continue as a band, and they asked me to join. And I just thought it was a great offer because they were all friends of mine. I knew them all well and respected them, and it seemed a shame to let it go to waste, and it was a great opportunity for me.
And I asked Rod Clements, had he continued to play bass when he rejoined Lindisfarne?
I actually stopped playing the bass around 1990
Okay.
in the original band because I was developing my slide guitar.
Yeah.
And I was writing more stuff that needed that as an element in it, that we all decided, the band decided, with my approval, that I would switch from bass to guitar and fiddle, which I'd always played, and mandolin and so forth. So when I joined this new band in 2015, it was as guitar, slide guitar, mandolin, fiddle, vocals.
And we should give mention to Dave Hull Denholm. I understand he's a relation of Alan.
Well, yes. Originally he was Dave Denham, and then he married Alan's daughter, Francesca. So he became Dave Hull Denham.
So there's something lovely poetic about that, isn't there? That the whole name continues in the band. I like that very much, and probably you do as well.
Yes, indeed. Alan and Dave had a very special relationship. I mean, Dave was obviously, he was 20 years younger than Alan for a start. But just before he died, Alan was working on a solo album, and Dave was working very closely with him on that. And they were doing gigs together and working together and things like that.
Yeah.
And Dave was very influenced by Alan's singing, playing, whole style anyway. And Alan unfortunately died before the album was finished, so Dave had a major hand in finishing it for him.
So Lindisfarne are touring again with the Fingers Crossed tour. Rod Clements explained the name for the tour.
Because we had a whole string of gigs planned for last year, because it was the band's 50th anniversary, and we had a lot of other celebratory items planned as well, including a specially brewed beer and things for Lindisfarne's anniversary ale, and all that. And of course, it all wasn't to be, but we spent most of last year, or rather the agent did, rescheduling gigs, which then got cancelled again. A lot of them have been replaced this year, but there's been a lot of uncertainty in the first part of this year about when or whether any gigs, as we know them, were going to happen again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you have to plan them anyway and put them together. So it was fingers crossed that it's going to happen.
I see. And what can people expect? What kind of material will you be performing?
We do, we do all the big songs.
Mm-hmm.
Run for Home, Fog on the Tyne, Meet Me on the Corner, and so forth. We do the ones that we think work on stage, with album tracks, stage favourites, and things like that. It's got a bit of anybody that knows the band, it's got a bit of everything. I mean, we range from sort of full-on rock with an acoustic flavour in that it's got mandolin or fiddle or harmonica in, to the quieter stuff. Alan's more personal songs, and I do a couple of bluesy ones, but with just the bass and the drummer. And we do a full show. We do a whole night without a support. We do 2 sets.
Oh wow! Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. So it's a total about 2 hours of Lindisfarne.
And you've got the energy these days to keep going through that for that length of time.
We seem to find it. Once you get up there. In fact, when I get together with the band, we've been rehearsing for the last few weeks to shake off the cobwebs and remind each other what we're supposed to be doing, and the energy level seems to rise as soon as we play. And then, of course, when you get out in front of an audience, it just lifts it to a whole new level again. And I think especially because people have been cooped up at home and not being able to go to gigs for such a long time.
Yes.
It just lifts everything. It's great.
Are there any plans for the latest version of Lindisfarne to do any recording?
Well, we've already released a live double CD.
Yeah.
It's called Real Live Lindisfarne.
What about in the future? Maybe any more studio recording?
Well, I certainly hope so. We're working on new songs as we go along.
Yeah.
Not collectively, but singly.
Yeah.
And we've actually got such a lot of old songs still that we want to do. Some from the later period of the band, for instance, I think would suit the new band very well.
Yes.
But certainly, yeah, I'm keeping on writing, and it just depends on whether it suits the band or not, really.
Yes.
But I'd love to get into the studio with this band and come out with a new album.
And that's Lindisfarne's founder and current member Rod Clements, who talked to me a few weeks ago. Special thanks to Rod for his time and the CDs that he mailed to me. Thanks to him and all of the Lindisfarne band members through the years for giving us such wonderful additions to the soundtrack of our lives. And if you want to check out their music, Rod particularly recommends that you start with their albums The Fog on the Tyne and Back and Forth, which I would agree are probably their best. But don't dismiss any of their other releases, and if you are so inclined, there's many treasures to be found also in Rod's and Alan Hull's solo catalogue as well. Thank you to you for listening.